Jack here, owner of Hockey Alley, bringing you back hockey history. Today I got Hall of Famer, legend of the game, Kings announcer, Los Angeles Kings announcer, Bob Miller. How are you, Bob?
I'm very good, Jack, and I'm enjoying my grandson's time with you at Hockey Alley. He's learning a lot, and so am I. So
Thank you.
it's good to see you teach and see him absorb everything that you teach him, and I hope it pays off for him.
Yes. Thank you so much. He's got a great attitude, such a very positive, worked hard, and he's picking it up very fast. And the
Good.
shots are looking good.
Okay, I'm going to look for those improvements in his when he plays in a game.
Yes, he will.
So
And the skating, the adjustment on the skates made a huge difference. He's just he works so hard. And
yeah,
once he finished the lesson, he went to another ice session and he did extra work on his own, which is impressive.
yeah, right. So
Yes. And the other day you mentioned to me that a lot of the new hockey players that are in the NHL don't know their hockey history. And I didn't even tell you about my channel that I do bring back hockey history. And then after that I said, Bob, I wanted to let you know that I actually talk about hockey history to educate the new generations. And that's how we got started into this, to do the interview.
right, I was always amazed that some of the younger players just don't. Some do know of what happened back in the past,
Yes.
but a lot of them don't. And that surprises me because they're so immersed into the sport that you think they just grow up knowing all the history or studying the history and the great players and maybe some of them don't. They're more in tune with their own game and trying to make an advance and into the NHL themselves. So
Yes. Yeah, this is what we want to bring the hockey history to the new generation. And I want to ask you, so when you were growing up, how did you get introduced to hockey?
well, I grew up in Chicago, and a friend of mine was a big hockey fan and kind of introduced me to it and said,
Oh,
Let's go to a Blackhawks game."
wow.
And we were young enough that we couldn't go on our own, so either his mother or my mother had to take us down to the Chicago Stadium, and the Blackhawks were not very good in those days.
Uh-huh.
I think if you called and said, "What time does the game start?" they said, "What time can you be here?" So you could get any seat in the place.
Wow.
But and it still was kind of a strange game to me. I was more of a baseball fan
Uh-huh.
growing up, and I thought, gee, they're all over the place and hard to follow the puck, but I really got into it, and then I kind of didn't lose track, but didn't become really involved in hockey because I went to the University of Iowa, and they didn't have a hockey team, and still don't, and so I didn't have a chance to broadcast any.
Oh.
I was broadcasting Iowa football and
Uh-huh.
basketball,
Oh.
and then later on, when I graduated, worked in Wisconsin, and my wife and I wound up in Madison, and the University of Wisconsin got really good in hockey, and the program director of the radio station I was working at said, "Oh, I'm glad this was on a Wednesday. I'm glad I ran into you today because this Friday and Saturday we're broadcasting hockey and you're doing the play-by-play."
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So that's how that started. Wow.
Yeah, I was shocked, and so I went to the coach. Tell me what I need to know. He said, "Well, you need to use Bob Johnson, who later won a Stanley Cup in Pittsburgh with the Penguins, a
Yep.
real enthusiastic guy. And well, you got to know this, you got to know that." And so we went on a road trip, and when we got back, I said to Martha Johnson, Bob Johnson's wife,
Yes.
the coach's wife, I said, "Martha, did you listen to the games?" She said, "Yes, of course." I said, "Well, were they any good?" She said, "Yeah, they were all right, but you didn't tell me who the referees were." I
Oh.
said, "Well, is that important?" She said, "Yes. how do I know who to be mad at if I don't know who the referees are? So I've never forgotten that. I've always mentioned who the referees are in the game.
Yes, you do. I remember all of the listening to you over the years. And who were you following back and when you were watching the games in Chicago? Who was the big stars at that time?
Well, it was a little before Bobby Hull got there, so I really didn't. I later saw him play, and Stan Mikita, but I'm trying to think the who the stars were, and I use the word stars loosely in those days because they weren't very good. Um, and I just can't remember who the big names were on the Blackhawks in those days.
Yes.
And later on, the son of Blackhawks coach Billy Ray,
Yes.
he played for the University of Wisconsin when I was doing the play-by-play for their team.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
so he could always get us into the games when they were playing, and his dad was coaching. So we'd go down to the games at that time, and the old Chicago Stadium was such a great
Yes.
energetic place. It was all steel and brick, and the acoustics. Nobody worried about great acoustics. Sound just bounced off of everything, and it was a tremendous place to watch a game, and a thrill for me later on to broadcast Kings games from the Chicago Stadium.
Yeah, it's an awesome. I seen it on TV. If it was my wish to have a time machine to go back, that would be the place I'd wanted to see a game from, and I never got a chance. Yeah. Yeah. I want to ask you, how do you prepare for a game? So a lot of fans know how players prepare, but announcers, broadcast for the hockey, how do you prepare? Is there a lot to it?
Yes, there is a lot to it, and I think that shocks some fans. I know some people used to say to me, 7:30 game, what time do you get to the arena? 7:15? I said, no, I get there about 3:15 in the afternoon.
Wow.
But a lot of the preparation is done days before. If we're not playing for a couple of days, I would have a legal pad of paper and write down the roster numerically. I'd always memorize the opponents. I knew our team, but I memorized the opponents numerically, not by who's on what line, because coaches, Scotty Bowman was famous for he changed lines in 5 seconds at the start of the game. So, and a lot of times now, what used to be a line, and some of the great names in the history of hockey, the production line in Detroit, and the gag line, the goal of game line in New York, and and of course the French Connection line in Buffalo was outstanding, and the Triple Crown line by the Kings. But now a lot of coaches, instead of having three players all the time, the same three on the line, they'll have the same two, and the third one would be kind of interchangeable. So to memorize lines, I never got too much into that. I'd keep the lines written down during the game, just to say, they made a line change here. They're going to put this player here. They took this player off of that line. But in memorizing and preparing for the game, I just write them down numerically. And I'd have that with me everywhere I went. We'd go to a movie theater, my wife and I, and while we're waiting for the movie to start, I'd be writing down the names of the opponents that we're going to play. And I could do that and memorize them in probably 5 minutes or so, and then I just keep doing that every day. And then the night before the game, our TV producer, would call me and just go over with me of, here's what we're going to do in the open, and here's what we're going to do between periods. Before the game, you're going to interview a certain player, so I'd be aware of that. We'd interview him on tape, and so the only thing scripted was the before the game and the intermissions and the open. And once the game started, it was strictly, ad lib, just describing what you were looking at, and that's the preparation that went into it. And you'd meet before the games with players, you'd meet with the opponent players, the opposing coaches, and read a lot of articles. And I think it's more difficult to prepare these days than it was 45 years ago when I started, because of all the information that's available now.
Yes.
And it's information available to everyone. And you're in the back of your mind, you think, boy, I've got to be up to date on all of this because the fans are up to date.
Yes,
And
it's true.
if I make a mistake, they're going to lose their confidence in you and say he's wrong on that, and they'd say he doesn't know what he's talking about. So, so it was quite lengthy preparation.
Got it. Wow. It's a lot of work for sure.
The toughest part would be back-to-back games, like one night after another, and I wouldn't start on the second game till I got the first game out of the way because I figured I'm going to get guys mixed up here. And especially tough when we would play teams in the Eastern Conference where we didn't play them very much. So you'd only see them maybe once a year or twice a year, and several months would go by before you'd see them again. So it would be a little tough in back-to-back games against those teams where first game you hadn't seen that team, and you don't have much time to prepare for the next night when you're on again with another team that you haven't seen. So it took a lot of work, and get there early and just to bring everything up to date. So when you go on the air, you're ready to go.
That's awesome. It looks easy on TV, but when behind the scenes, that's fans don't know, and that's why it's interesting. I'm learning a lot. It's the first time I hear that's how it's done. What team had the worst jersey font as far as numbers go? Where it was difficult to see it. Sometimes I had trouble seeing the numbers because of the way the font is. For you, what was it? Was there any?
Well, there were a couple. One of them was the LA Kings when they had that third jersey, which the people call the Burger King jersey.
Oh, yes.
And it had a black stripe going right through. Well, if you had two numbers, the black stripe went right through the numbers, and it was really hard to see. I didn't like those jerseys at all. And one year, we had white jerseys with silver numbers, and I remember Rogie Vachon, who was then our general manager. He said to me, "What do you think of our new jersey?" And he's holding a jersey up, and I was about 8 feet away, and I said, "Can I see the numbers?" He said, "Well, can't you see it?" I said, "I'm only 8 feet away from you. What about when I'm 200 feet away from you on the ice in a silver number on a white jersey?" And we wore those, and the opposing broadcasters always said, "Bob, those jerseys, we can't see the numbers." And I always felt the NHL should have someone who approves or disapproves the numbers, and you've got to have the numbers plainly visible to people sitting 200 feet away or more in the upper deck, and be aware of that. So the Kings had a couple of the worst jerseys that, as far as numbers and identification, that I had to deal with.
Yeah. Which is the best jersey you've ever seen in hockey? Your favorite or the nicest looking, in your opinion?
I think the Chicago Blackhawks. And I think that's not only my opinion, it's the opinion of a lot of people in hockey, that they had the classiest looking uniforms.
Yes, I have to agree. That's my favorite one too. Yeah. Did you use a monitor sometimes during the game, or did you watch in like a fan, or did you use a monitor half of the time? Or?
No, I didn't use the monitor too often. We had them there and used them mainly on replays
Got it.
of goals or penalties or whatever, and we'd look at the monitor to see what and describe what the person at home was seeing, so that we could point that out.
Yes.
And uh, so, um, uh, but I wouldn't. The only place I did a lot of play-by-play off the monitor was in Madison Square Garden in New York, because we had the worst location. They've remodeled it since, and it's better. In fact, when they remodeled it and we had a really good location, I said on the air one night, I've been doing games here in New York for 40 years, and tonight's the first game I've seen.
Wow.
Because you couldn't see the far winger, if you didn't see him jump on the ice, and so I really relied a lot on the monitor to do the play-by-play. But most times I wanted to look at the game live.
Got it.
And so I just followed the game on the ice. And like I say, on replays or something, or if the producer said, "Okay, here's a shot of this that we have," well, then you'd look at the monitor, because that's what the person at home is seeing.
Yeah, I've seen Madison Square Garden, on TV, but not in person. So it's hard to. I'm trying to imagine like where you were. I've seen a lot of it, but not the whole, the stadium.
Yeah, we were not in like an upper deck, which they have now, but it was really sloped, and so we were low and far back, and just not a great angle.
No. Yeah, I wanted to ask you. So hockey is the fastest sport in the world, team sport, and the action's continuous. Pucks switching hands quickly, and positions are moving fast. How difficult would it be for a baseball or football announcer to call a hockey game if you were to bring him in right off from doing baseball or football?
Well, I think it would be tough at the start, but those are professional announcers, and they're trained to do play-by-play. So I think they could do it. Like in my case, I don't think I would be very good at doing baseball, because there's so much downtime where you've got to have something to talk about when there's really no action on the field. And so I would be, struggling to do that as far as baseball. But I think any of those announcers could make the transition and do it, and have the experience to do it smoothly enough that you would say, "Hey, he's doing a good job." And but there's an old story about Bob Prince, who was a great announcer on baseball for the Pirates in Pittsburgh, and everybody loved him. So when they got hockey in Pittsburgh, they thought, well, let's get Bob Prince to do the play-by-play. And the story goes, they dropped the puck, and Bob Prince's description was, "There's the face-off. They've got it. Nope, we've got it. Nope, they've got it again." And he didn't last too long.
No. I didn't know that. Wow. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, who was the best skater you ever saw in the history of the game, all the years that you broadcast?
Well, you and I talked about this the other day.
Yes.
I said I would pay to see Paul Coffey skate, not play a game or anything, just to see him skate. He was the smoothest skater that I've ever seen. Just marvel to watch him skate up and down the ice.
And fast.
Fast, and I think he curled his. He didn't wear socks in the skates.
Mm-hmm.
He curled his toes underneath. Wore his skates size too small.
Yes.
So the skate fit like a glove, and he was marvelous. And he played for the Kings for a few years, and I just enjoyed watching him skate.
Yeah, me too. Amazing skater and a great goal scorer too for defense. I think he holds a record for the most goals in a season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was part of those great Oiler teams when they were really
Yeah.
great Stanley Cup champions.
Yeah. Yes. What about the best goalie? In your opinion, who is the best goalie you ever saw?
Well, I think I'd pick a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Patrick Waugh, when he was in Montreal,
Mm-hmm.
was really good. He beat the Kings in the Stanley Cup final in '93, and but he had good players in front of him. Uh, the other goalie that set all kinds of records and had great longevity was Martin Brodeur with the New
Yes.
Jersey Devils.
Yes.
So, uh, some goalies in those days, I watch film now, they were, God, they were so out of position and on with one leg in the air, looked like a flamingo. But nobody had goalie coaches. So
Yeah.
if the goaltender got in bad habits, there was nobody there to tell him, "Hey, you're not doing this right." And now today, you hear everything about be square to the shooter, don't lean, don't be
Yes.
ready for the first shot and the rebound. And the goal tending coaches are really valuable to all these teams now. But when I started, we had one coach, Bob Pulford. He was the head coach. He had no assistants, so nobody could take a goaltender and say, "Here's what you're doing right or wrong." Uh, and it was really behind the times as far as getting your staff together and having the assistance that you need to help the team.
Yeah, it's true. It's a lot's changed in the game for sure.
Oh yeah,
Huge,
yeah.
huge. I want to ask you this one, and we both agreed on this. I asked you this the other day because I thought it was interesting. For the Los Angeles Kings, what was bigger, the Wayne Gretzky trade or them winning the Stanley Cup?
Well, it's you know, I would say I'm trying to think now, really, in my mind, what was bigger. I think the acquisition of Wayne Gretzky was the biggest as far as the Kings becoming well known throughout all of North America.
Yes.
The fact that the greatest scorer in the history of the game was playing for a U.S. based team was very important. And that really prompted all these other cities in warm weather areas to have hockey, like Dallas and the Carolinas and Florida. And so many people got interested in hockey in the United States because they could watch Wayne Gretzky playing for the LA Kings. And so I think that was a big moment. Not to say the first Stanley Cup for the Kings wasn't a big moment because all of us had waited so long and so
Yes.
many fans had waited a lot longer than I did to see the Kings lift that Stanley Cup at center ice. It was a very emotional moment
Yes.
and a moment that a lot of fans, I think, thought, I don't think we'll ever see this. I always said, I'm afraid I'm going to retire and they're going to win the Stanley Cup the next year. And that would have been devastating to me
Yes.
after waiting for so many years.
Yes.
So to see them win not only one, but then win it twice in 3 years was
Yes.
amazing.
Amazing for sure.
We went to the Stanley Cup party, my wife and I, after the first Stanley Cup win. And those Stanley Cup parties are all alike. And I said, are we going to go to every one of these Stanley Cup parties? She said, of course we are. We may never see this again. 2 years later, here we see it again. So, you never know what's going to happen.
That's true.
But the Gretzky acquisition shocked the world. I say it was the biggest trade in sports history. I know a lot of people say, well, Babe Ruth was traded. I say, yeah, but Babe Ruth, when he was traded, was not the Babe Ruth that we know later as a home run hitter. He was a pitcher in Boston, and he was traded. It didn't have the impact of Gretzky, who was the leader in almost every category at the height of his prime, and getting traded was unbelievable, and was shocked people around the world that somebody like that could be traded.
Yeah, it's a huge impact for sure. I felt it with the hockey got, more kids started to play because of Wayne Gretzky and the whole southern belt of the United States. And, selling tickets like you've never seen before, season ticket holders, you name it,
Oh, yeah.
It was insane. It was amazing. And we
When,
thank Wayne Gretzky and we thank Bruce McNall for what he's done to LA for hockey. We'll never
yeah.
forget.
I had heard rumors a few days before that trade happened that,
Oh, yeah.
that the Kings may get Wayne Gretzky, and I thought, oh my God, I can't believe it. I got to find out about this. So I called Bruce McNall. At that time, he was the owner of the Kings, and I thought, I'm going to ask him, but I don't want to come right out and ask him. So I pretended I hadn't. I said, Bruce, I'm just wondering how many TV games are we going to do this year? And I really wanted to know about Gretzky, but he said, "Well, we're going to do some more games this year." And then I thought, well, I don't know. Should I ask him or not? Is he going to get upset? Because nothing had been said. There were rumors, but nothing had been released by the Kings at that point. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go ahead and ask him. So I said, "Tell me this. Are you going to sign Wayne Gretzky?" And there was a silence, and I thought, oh, maybe he's upset that I asked that. And he said, "Tell me this. We're going to change our uniform, change the colors, change the logo, and the person modeling the new uniform will be Wayne Gretzky." I said, if you pull that off, it's going to be unbelievable. Yeah. And he said, "I think we're going to get it done."
Wow.
I thought, oh my God. And so I couldn't, then they told me, we're going to have don't say anything, but we're going to have a press conference next Tuesday and make the announcement. Wow. But don't say anything to anybody. So I didn't. And I went into the forum where the Kings were playing in those days, and Jerry West, who was general manager of the Lakers, whispered to me, "Come here." And I went over and he whispered in my ear, "The deal is done."
Oh, wow.
I said, "What? How do you know?" And he said, "Well, I played golf yesterday with someone who knows. The deal is done." Wow. And I found out later he'd played with Bruce McNall. So, and then I think they were going to have it actually the press conference on a Thursday, and they called me and said, "We need you tomorrow, Tuesday, because word is getting out that this deal is going to get done." So I went down and emceed the press conference, and it was unbelievable. About 12 live TV cameras, the biggest press conference in Kings history. And so many reporters and photographers. And when Wayne came out and had put that Kings jersey on, the automatic cameras sounded like machine gun fire. They were just, wow. And one of the reporters in jest hollered, "What number did you get?" Like he was going to get something other than 99. And it was just unbelievable to see that many people at a Kings news conference. And again, it reinforced my feeling this team is now gone from a team that people knew about but didn't talk about too much, right to the top of everybody's awareness.
Yes.
And there was a great uptick in souvenir sales, Kings hats and jackets and jerseys, and people calling for tickets, as you mentioned, season tickets. People, they had to put extra people on the phones. People would call in, I want 4 season tickets. And they'd say, well, we're not sure what the price is going to be yet. Doesn't matter. Here's my credit card number. I want 4 tickets.
Wow.
Tell me later what the price is.
Wow.
And then the big stars, Ronald Reagan and his wife Nancy were sitting right by the glass at the arena. Not every game, but a lot of games. And the locker room after a game was filled with Hollywood celebrities, coming down to everybody wanted to see, I think, as you mentioned, everybody wanted to see the greatest player in the history of the game as far as scoring.
Yes.
And I said to people, it's like if we grew up watching and had a chance to watch Babe Ruth, oh, yes, I want to go see him in his heyday,
Same thing.
And that's the way it was with Wayne. Everybody knew, if they never watched a hockey game, they knew the name Wayne Gretzky.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a magical moment for sure.
Very. Glad to be alive in that time to see that happen. It was yes. Yeah, I want to ask you about actor John Candy. Did he hang around the team much when Wayne Gretzky came in? Because I knew he was with Bruce McNall a lot at the games.
Yeah, he was a partner with McNall, and I think in the Toronto Argonauts football team, and with some other ventures with Wayne. And he would travel with the team once in a while, not all the time. But I remember one trip when John Candy was on the team plane, and the movie they showed was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which John Candy was one of the stars in. And he was sitting 2 rows ahead of me and over on the aisle to my left. And I had seen the movie before, and it was so funny. I just watched John Candy. I wanted to see his reaction when he was watching the movie, and he was just shaking, laughing so hard in his seat. And when the movie ended, I said to him, John, that is one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. And he said, I hadn't seen the whole thing, the final cut. He said, we had a director who never thought he had enough film, and we shot all kinds of extra film, and I wasn't sure what made it and what didn't make it. So he really enjoyed watching that, and I enjoyed watching him watching the movie. So it was fun to see those celebrities come around, and we had a chance on radio to interview Don Rickles and Rich Little and do his impersonations, and so it was as I say, it was a magical time for Kings hockey at that time. Yeah,
it was awesome.